the thrill of a new year often brings out our sense of adventure and curiosity. While most people celebrate with fireworks, parties, and resolutions, some take things a step further, diving into rituals or games they don't fully understand. These choices might seem harmless at first but can quickly spiral into something far more sinister. In tonight's video, we'll explore chilling stories of individuals who dared to push the boundaries of the unknown after celebrating the new year. From eerie rituals to supernatural encounters, these tales will leave you questioning just how thin the veil between our world and something darker can be. Let's dive in. Let's go to the first story told by Freddie. My name is Freddie, and this is a story I never thought I'd be sharing. It happened after New Year's Eve, when my friends and I made the reckless decision to play with a Ouija board. It's something we'd joked about plenty of times before, but on this particular night, the idea seemed more tempting than ever. Maybe it was the excitement of the celebrations or the few drinks we'd had, but when Jordan pulled the board out of his bag, none of us hesitated. It was about 2 a.m., and the party had finally died down. The streets were quiet except for the occasional sound of fireworks in the distance. We were at Oliver's house, sitting in his dimly lit basement. Glenn turned off the music, and we all gathered around the board. The atmosphere shifted immediately. The laughter and teasing quieted as we placed our fingers on the planchette. Jordan started the session, asking the usual questions. Is there anyone here with us, and can you give us a sign? At first, nothing happened, and we were half ready to pack it up and call it a failed attempt. But then the planchette moved. Slowly, deliberately, it slid to yes. We froze, staring at each other, trying to figure out who was pushing it. All right, who's messing around? Oliver asked, laughing nervously. No one admitted to it. Glenn's face had gone pale, and he muttered, I don't like this, guys. But we continued. Jordan asked the spirit its name, and the planchette spelled out something we couldn't fully make sense of, letters scrambled, like a code. Then, out of nowhere, the basement door slammed shut. We jumped, our eyes darting to the stairs. Oliver shouted, What the hell was that, and bolted up to check. The door was locked from the inside, something that shouldn't have been possible. As Oliver fiddled with the lock, Jordan asked another question. Did you do that? The planchette moved quickly now, spelling run. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Before we could even process the message, the lights flickered and went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. In the pitch black, we heard something. It was faint at first, like a soft whisper, but it grew louder, surrounding us. A voice, low and guttural, muttered something none of us could understand. Then came the laughter. It wasn't any of us, it was chilling, hollow, echoing around the room. Glenn screamed, and we all scrambled for the stairs. The door finally gave way as Oliver threw himself against it, and we tumbled out into the hallway. None of us spoke as we grabbed our stuff and bolted out of the house, leaving the board behind. Even Jordan, the one who had been the most eager to play, looked shaken. That night, none of us got any sleep. Glenn refused to go back to Oliver's house, and Oliver ended up staying with me for a few days. We never touched a Ouija board again. Whatever we contacted that night, it wasn't friendly, and I don't think it wanted us to leave. Even now, years later, I can't hear the sound of laughter in a quiet room without feeling my stomach churn. That night taught me that some things are better left alone. If you're ever tempted to mess with something you don't understand, think twice, because you might not be able to undo what you set loose. Now let's go to the second story, told by Lola. My name is Lola, and I wish I could say I spent last New Year's Eve celebrating with friends or family. Instead, I was stuck working a double shift at the diner. By the time I got home, it was past midnight, and the streets were eerily quiet. Fireworks had already faded, and the world seemed to be holding its breath for the start of a new year. Feeling too wired to sleep, I started scrolling through Reddit, killing time. That's when I stumbled across a thread in a paranormal subreddit titled The Mirror Game. It sounded ridiculous, but also intriguing. The instructions were simple: sit in front of a mirror in a dark room with only a single candle lit. You were supposed to stare at your reflection without blinking for as long as possible, and according to the post, you'd see something else. It sounded like a fun way to shake off the loneliness, so I decided to try it. I set up in my tiny bathroom, lighting a single candle and turning off all the lights. I sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the mirror and stared into my own eyes. At first, nothing happened. It was just me, looking tired and a little silly in the dim light. But then, the atmosphere in the room changed. The air felt heavier, colder. My reflection seemed off. It was subtle at first, just a flicker in the corner of my eye, like the candlelight playing tricks. But then I noticed something undeniable. My reflection wasn't blinking when I did. It was staring straight back at me, unblinking, with a faint smirk that wasn't on my own face. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then, my reflection tilted its head slightly to the side, something I hadn't done. My heart pounded as I sat frozen, unsure of what to do. The smirk on its face grew wider, unnatural, stretching too far across its face. That's when the candle went out. The room plunged into darkness, and I felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched, not just by my reflection, but by something else in the room. I scrambled to my feet, fumbling for the light switch. When the bathroom light flickered on, I let out a scream. My reflection was gone. The mirror showed the bathroom, the candle, and me, but there was no reflection of me in it. I stumbled backward, hitting the doorframe, and as soon as I looked away from the mirror, I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, almost too quiet to hear, but it came from the direction of the mirror. "Why did you stop?" it said. I bolted out of the bathroom, leaving the candle and everything else behind. I spent the rest of the night sitting in my living room with every light in the apartment turned on. I didn't go back into that bathroom until daylight, and even then, I avoided looking at the mirror. To this day, I don't know what I saw or if it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But I threw out that mirror the next morning, and I've never tried anything like that again. If you're ever tempted to mess with something supernatural just because you're bored, don't. You might end up seeing something you'll never forget. Are you still there? Let's start the third story, told by Julian. My name is Julian, and this is the kind of story I never thought I'd be sharing. It all started on New Year's Eve, after a night of heavy drinking and way too much TikTok scrolling. My friends Victor, Samuel, and I had been watching these ridiculous videos of people claiming they summon spirits or demons using random objects or chants. Most of it seemed fake, like people doing it for clout or views. We were all drunk enough to find it funny, and Samuel joked, "What if we tried it? Start the year with a bang, right?" We all laughed, but the idea stuck. The more we joked about it, the more it started to sound like a great idea. A bad mix of alcohol and boredom is a dangerous combination. So, we set up in the living room. Victor found a video that showed how to summon a friendly spirit using a glass, some candles, and a piece of paper with letters and numbers, Basically a homemade Ouija board. None of us believed in that stuff, so it was all just a joke to us. We placed the glass in the center of the paper and lit the candles, dimming the lights for effect. Samuel, slurring his words, started saying the chant from the video while the rest of us giggled like idiots. At first, nothing happened, just as we expected. The glass didn't move, and the room was as silent as ever. But then, things shifted. The air felt heavy, like the room suddenly got smaller. The candles flickered, though there was no breeze. Victor joked, "Oh, spooky," but even he looked uneasy. That's when the glass moved. None of us had touched it, but it slid across the paper, stopping on a random letter. We froze, staring at each other in shock. "Who's messing around?" I asked, my voice unsteady. Both Victor and Samuel swore they hadn't touched it, and I knew I hadn't either. Samuel, still drunk and trying to act brave, said, "Let's ask it something." He leaned closer and asked, "Is there anyone here with us?" The glass didn't move at first, but then it slowly slid to yes. The laughter was gone now. The three of us just sat there, wide-eyed, too scared to say anything. Victor broke the silence, muttering, "Okay, this isn't funny anymore." Before we could end the game, one of the candles went out. Then another. The room was almost pitch black, lit only by the single remaining candle. That's when we heard it, a faint knock coming from the hallway. "That's just the wind," I said, trying to convince myself more than them. But then it happened again. Louder. Closer. Victor grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it toward the hallway. There was nothing there. "Let's stop this," I said, my voice shaking. But Samuel, in his drunken bravery, shouted, "If someone's here, show yourself." Big mistake. The knocking turned into banging, like someone was slamming their fists against the walls. The single candle flickered violently before going out completely. In the darkness, we heard something, a low, guttural growl that didn't sound human. We bolted out of the apartment without looking back. None of us spoke as we stood outside in the freezing night air, catching our breath. When we finally went back in, all the candles were out, and the glass had shattered on the floor. We don't talk about that night anymore, and none of us has touched anything remotely supernatural since. I don't know what we summoned or if it was all just a series of coincidences amplified by our drunken paranoia. But one thing's for sure, we'll never mess with that kind of thing again. If you're thinking about trying it, let me save you the trouble, don't. Some doors shouldn't be opened, even as a joke. Last story, it is told by Amelia. My name is Amelia, and this is a story I wish I could forget. My boyfriend Luke and I had planned a quiet getaway for New Year's Eve. We rented a cozy Airbnb cabin in the countryside, just the two of us, no distractions, no big parties. It sounded perfect. A couple of days before New Year's, our friend Dylan visited us at the cabin. He brought along a bottle of champagne and some bizarre stories he'd picked up online. One, in particular, caught his attention, a supposed good luck ritual to bring wealth in the new year. Dylan swore he'd heard about people doing it and having their lives change overnight. Luke and I laughed it off at first, but Dylan kept insisting. "It's harmless," he said. "You light a few candles, write your name on a piece of paper, and bury it under the first tree you see at midnight. That's it. Easy money." Luke was intrigued, and honestly, after a couple of drinks, I didn't see the harm either. Dylan even offered to stay and do it with us. So, on New Year's Eve, we prepared for the ritual. Dylan scribbled some instructions on a piece of paper, 3 red candles, our names on a slip of paper, and an old coin to seal the deal. At midnight, we stood outside under the clear, cold sky. It was eerie how quiet everything was, no fireworks, no distant voices, just the sound of the wind in the trees. We followed the instructions exactly, burying the paper and coin under a large oak tree near the cabin. Dylan finished the ritual with a weird chant he'd found online, something about inviting fortune and opening doors. As soon as he said the last word, a gust of wind rushed past us, extinguishing the candles. Dylan grinned and said, "See? It worked." But something felt off. That night, strange things started happening. It began with small noises, creaks and taps coming from the walls of the cabin. Luke said it was just the old building settling, but it didn't feel normal. Then, around 3 a.m., we heard footsteps on the porch. Dylan peeked out the window but saw nothing. "Probably an animal," he said, trying to sound nonchalant. But the footsteps didn't stop. They moved around the cabin, slow and deliberate, as if someone, or something, was circling us. We locked all the doors and tried to go to bed, but none of us could sleep. The atmosphere felt heavy, almost suffocating. Luke and I stayed in the bedroom while Dylan crashed on the couch. Around 4 a.m., I woke up to the sound of whispering. It was faint, like it was coming from inside the walls. I shook Luke awake, but he brushed it off, saying I was probably dreaming. Then we heard Dylan scream. We ran into the living room to find him standing in the middle of the room, pale and shaking. "Someone was staring at me through the window," he stammered. But when we looked outside, there was no one there. We decided to leave immediately. We packed our things in record time and drove back to town as the sun was rising. None of us spoke the entire ride back. Later, we found out the cabin had a history. Previous guests had reported strange occurrences, unexplained noises, objects moving on their own, and even sightings of shadowy figures. We also discovered that the ritual Dylan had found wasn't for good luck. It was something much darker, meant to summon spirits. I don't know what we invited that night, but it followed us. For weeks after, I felt like I was being watched. Doors would creak open on their own, and I'd hear faint whispers when I was alone. It's been months now, and things have mostly gone back to normal, but every New Year's Eve, I still feel a chill run down my spine. If you ever hear about a simple ritual promising wealth or fortune, don't do it. Some things aren't worth the risk. As we've seen tonight, the excitement of New Year's can sometimes lead people down unsettling paths. What begins as innocent fun or curiosity can quickly turn into something far more terrifying. These stories are a reminder that some doors are better left closed, and some games are not worth playing. Thank you for listening, and remember to stay safe, especially when exploring the unknown. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, take care and Happy New Year.